Do you want to be good with code? Become a better developer? Write good code? I think everyone wants to do that, right? So let me give you 5 secrets, 5 tips that will help you write better code and hopefully become a better developer. Let's get into it. Let me tell you a bit of a story. We're going to be working on a brand new feature on an existing project that we have not worked on before. What's the first thing you do? I usually cry for help, but after I do that, I would read and understand the code that's there. Now, I'm not saying read the entire code base, but be honest with me. How often do you read and understand a new repository that you're going to be working with? You know, not just the changes that you'll be making, but anything that it might affect downstream or upstream. Because doing that will set you good for the rest of this feature work. And that is number 1, reading and understanding what you're working with. Now that's great. You've read, understood, been patient with the code, understood the upstream, downstream dependencies. What's the second thing you do? Run the code locally. Right? Would you do that? I would do that. Now you might think that, hey, of course I do that. That's easy. Right? And maybe if you say that's easy, then you're very lucky because not everyone is potentially working in an environment where they have a README that describes them how to run the project. Sometimes it just says welcome, ... But think about it. How many times does the README say follow these steps and you're going to have it up and running? And how many of those times when you first opened a repo, gone through the steps, there's an error? So you might think running the code locally is easy and straightforward, but there are so many nuances, so many points at which you might break because the code breaks. So that's number 2, running the code locally, which isn't always the easiest thing to do. Now that you've read the code, understood the code, and you've run the code locally, great. What's next? Writing well-tested code, of course. And you might be like, hey, Sohil, my code, always 100% covered. Great, good for you. But we all know 100% test coverage doesn't mean that the tests are good, right? For example, the classic function, takes 2 arguments, returns the sum of them. I could easily test that by making sure that I put in 1 and 2 and it always returns 3. Easy, simple, covered the code 100%, boom. But we all know I haven't covered all the nuances and the edge cases. And sure, TypeScript solves this issue for JavaScript, right? If you move on to TypeScript, you're not going to get this issue. But those nuances still exist later down the line. So writing good code and writing good tests isn't about making sure that you've covered your code 100%. It's about testing those edge cases and nuances to make sure that things don't break. And how are you going to know about these edge cases and nuances? Well, I hope you've done number 1 well, which is reading and understanding the code. If you know your upstream, downstream dependencies, and you know what's going in, what's going out, you can cater for these edge cases in your tests really well. And that is number 3. Let's get to number 4, right? You've just written the code, well tested, you're really proud of what you've done, but something you should be aware of are coding principles. And I'm not saying you should be using these coding principles, well, you should, but you should be aware of them at least, right? So, for example, you've got dry, which is do repeat yourself, kiss, which is keep it stupid simple, right? You've got those top level ones, and then we kind of go into, for example, a couple of different ones like solid, where the S stands for single responsibility principle. There you go, got it. Open close principle, Liskov principle, and something else, right? And then you've got on the other side functional programming concepts, currying, recursion, higher order functions, first class functions, pure functions, all of those things. And I'm not saying you should be using these, but you should be aware of them. Now, why should you be aware of them? Because A, when you do number one, you read, understand the code, you'll notice that, this code base, this repository is using these type of principles, which means when you come to number three, which is writing your code, you're going to try and use those same patterns. You're not going to write something, if it's written in, OOP, you're not going to write something in FP or the other way around. I mean, you could, but your code's going to stick out like batshit crazy. So that is why you do number one, so that you can, and obviously read and understanding the code is going to help you write the code better. And the reason for that is you're going to know your principles, your coding principles. So that's that one. This brings us to the final point. This story is going to end soon. But before it does, once you write your code and you deploy it, the one thing that could happen, most likely will happen, happens a lot in my case, is you're going to get bugs. And a good developer knows how to investigate these issues, document them well, and then fix the issues. Now, if you're me, or if you've been following me along, then you've definitely read and understood the code, right? And you've written all the tests, all the edge cases. So when it comes time for these bugs, something has come out of the blue, you're going to be in a better position to find out and figure out where the issue already exists, because you've done the reading, you've done the understanding, and it will make it easier for you to figure out what's wrong and where it's wrong. And once you find that out, you're going to patch it by adding that extra test. Investigating and fixing bugs is a culmination of you reading, understanding, writing code, running code, just puts it all together, wraps it all up. And doing that end to end will mean you own your own code. And owning your code is the next level. You reach that and you're golden. Now, I could end it here because that's the end of our story. The 5 points that are going to help you improve, become a better developer, write better code. But there's one more thing. You do these 5 things again and again and again, day after day, month after month, you're going to have something that's going to be building inside of you, right? You want to know what that is? The bonus thing that you're going to build if you keep on doing these things again and again? Coding instinct. Or instinct, as I call it. Have you ever looked at a piece of code and gone, that looks horrible? Or, people do that with my code, but it could be the alternative, and it could be, oh, that code looks good. Let me copy that. Let me take that a step further. Have you paired with an engineer when you've had an issue you just haven't been able to solve, and the other person's gone like, I have an idea of where this is actually breaking. And then you ask them, hey, how did you figure that out? And they go, I just had an inkling. I just had this feeling. That feeling, that instinct is what you will build if you keep on doing this day after day, follow these steps, do these 5 things, build up this instinct, and you're on your way to the next level. That's it from me on this one. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like down below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.